Welcome to the Recruiting Stories Podcast, where we celebrate recruiting by exploring the stories of leaders and top performers by digging into their stories and understanding how recruiting has impacted their journey and their success. All right, everybody, welcome to the Recruiting Stories Podcast. Excited for today. We've got John Calloway from Logex. He is the President and CEO. Is that the right title?
Just President.
Just President.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Not trying to hand out titles. I get in trouble. But
right. I'll get a knock on the door from ownership.
Right. That's not how it works around here. Right. Sure. Well, hey, thank you so much for being here, John. Would love to just really introduce kind of who you are. I know that you have been in the industry for a number of years, and obviously Logex is still what I would consider a fairly new company, right? How long have you guys been around?
3 years this time.
Okay.
Yeah. The ownership team started the company in 2015.
Cool.
And they just never got it up and running.
Okay. Cool.
So I would call it a resurrection of Logex.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Well, okay. So obviously it's a Recruiting Stories podcast. So I want to talk through like your, a little bit of your background and how you ended up where you are. So I remember, crazy story for everybody, I actually talked to John when I was recruiting way back in the day. Like I had called him, was it like when you were still in college?
Yes, my senior year.
Senior year in college. So that tells you how old I am, for one. But I reached out to John and I was like, man, this guy's super impressive. I knew you were going places and really was trying to recruit you. And you ended up going a different route, which obviously has worked out incredibly well for you. So tell me a little bit about just some of your story in transportation and where you are now.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Adrian. It is pretty funny because now that I'm sitting here talking to you about my story and how I've gotten into the industry, I had no idea what logistics, supply chain, and transportation what it really meant to be in the industry until you called me.
Nice. Awesome.
so yes. Yeah, right. You were my first exposure to the industry.
I didn't realize that.
Well, and as I was, prepping for our podcast episode today, that I recalled that memory because I was thinking through, I was like, man, looking back at my history, when did I get exposed? It was Adrian.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
I was like, he's the one that first called me. Huh. So, which, at that time, like you said, you were with e-shipping and I was looking for a full-time job out of college. But ever since that call that we had, obviously leading up to, which job I decided to take, I started applying to other companies in the industry that were in the servicing space within the transportation, supply chain industry. Yeah, which obviously, like you said, went a different route. I worked at C.H. Robinson for a number of years, but the biggest impact point of that journey on the beginning side, I would say, was my conversations with recruiters because they were the first touch point. They were the initial exposure to those companies. And they defined my perspective of who those companies were. So if they were people first, if they were business first, if they were a blend, whatever within those conversations led me to build this identity for them. It helped me figure out which route I wanted to take. And that's not a bash to say that you didn't do that. Right.
Yeah. Perfect. But obviously I did not succeed.
Right. And locking me in. But, there were a few variables, and I think the main one really just to justify Adrian here. I wasn't willing to move. I wasn't willing to move cities.
Right.
So that's what it boiled down to. But yeah, you fast forward now and, where I'm at with Logex and starting up a company and expanding it out over the past 3 years. What I've learned through being recruited and being the recruiter, if you will, is that you define who you are as a leader and you define what your business is. Right. And for us, that's been a huge value add and competitive advantage at Logex because, people talk about culture all the time. Right. And from my experience, sometimes that can be a lot of smoke and mirrors. It can be a mirage, right? When you get down to it.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not what we have at Logex. Right. We put people first. We have people that work very hard. We all trust each other and we're aligned with the vision of the company. And when you walk into our building, you see that, you feel that. And that's really important for us to maintain as we continue to grow, because we want to bring similar people in that we've handpicked to this day.
So there's so much to unpack with that. Love what you are building with Logex. I think that's amazing. Also, I didn't know that I helped John get started in transportation. So that's free. I didn't plan that, guys. But
I owe you a steak dinner.
Yes, perfect. But that's super cool. One thing that you said about the recruiting side is about recruiters. That really helps you as a young job seeker, like build an identity around companies and who they are and if they will fit. So I think that is amazing and incredibly true too. Just like if you think about your organization and your salespeople being the tip of the spear, right? People are going to associate that company's values and integrity and how they solve problems with the tip of the spear. Same with recruiters when it comes to reaching out to job seekers, and especially new job seekers who may not understand the industry as a whole. So I think that's,
or even the professional workforce in general.
Yeah.
Right? And this is, and look, I'm all for learning and education, but I think where schools miss the mark at times is not preparing students for what a real world application looks like. And they think that a four-wall room classroom learning style translates perfectly to real world experience and application. And it doesn't a lot of the times. Right. So, to your point, you get on these calls and you don't know what you don't know. You're young. You're probably a little bit immature in the sense of, hey, I really have no idea what's going on. Right.
You think you do. You think you do.
But the recruiters are that spear that say, hey, here's who we are as a company. Here's what you can expect from the people here within our building. Is that something that aligns with you missionally? Because that's something that is super important. And not a lot of people get told that, right? They say, look at the, which all these things are good, right? What I'm about to say, look at the benefits, look at the comp, look at the structure. Is it a flat organization? Is there a huge hierarchy? All these things are not bad. They're good things to think about. But for a lot of people, they want to have some merit in their work, right? Like they want to be able to go home and say, man, I accomplished this. I did it with these people. And I have a lot of pride in what we do. Right. I wear that. How do you prepare people, younger people too, more importantly, to shift their mindset to something that is geared towards, I want to value my work and not just view it as another commoditized thing. Right.
To follow up on that point, I will say this, and I feel like we're talking about almost like a millennial workforce here, but speaking of that group, right? These younger generations, this is my experience talking to thousands of people across the country. They are more interested in this idea of mission and meaning than any group I've ever talked to. They just seem to be thirsty for, I want what I do to matter. And yes, of course, compensation matters. And yes, of course, benefits matter. And yes, of course, time off, all of those things matter. But there just seems to be this desire for I want to make an impact on something tangible. And that being able to paint that picture, as you mentioned, seems to be extremely crucial.
It is. And as we progress through the episode here, I do want to echo, right? All those things are important. I think like most things, the answer is finding a balance of all of it. And not leaning to one side or the other 100%. Too strongly.
Can't be all one and no pay, right?
Right. Or all pay and you really can't stand what you're doing.
Yeah. That's helpful. So, okay, I want to dive back into your story a little bit. So you talked about how, I think you said with C.H. Robinson where you started?
Yep.
C.H. Robinson. Okay. So was there anything, about, obviously C.H. big company, great company, anything about that experience, I guess, not working there per se, but the recruiting process that helped you be man, that's really where I want to go, really where I want to get started? Was it the relationships? Was it the technology? Was it what helped you say that's the place that I'm going?
It's definitely the relationships. I went through a couple interviews with the recruiter and then an interview at the main office. So the experience, and I still have a relationship with her today.
Mm-hmm.
She's since left CH and gone to 2 different companies, but she is definitely a person that, one, is good at her job.
Yeah,
great at her job.
Yeah.
But 2, she was authentic, and it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. She answered the tough questions that I had for her in a very straightforward, honest way. So through the recruiting experience, with her giving me a full glimpse into who C.H. Robinson was, it allowed me to make a better educated decision on, hey, what's my next step here or here?
Right.
And then I got into the in-office interviews, and the leader of that office at the time, the second I started talking to him, I could tell that he was focused on his team, on his people, and they were going to take precedence over a P&L statement or a call log attempt list, which, again, you got to do the work. Right. Right. This isn't a free ride. Right. Yeah. Right. But even in the instances where, let's say, you fell short this month, his initial response was, well, why aren't you doing your job? It was, hey, let's talk about what's driving this. Are they things that you can control? Are they things that you can't control? And is there a problem internally with the structure that I can help alleviate? Right. Because that takes the magnifying glass out of his hand and out of your face. Right. And that finger that's in your chest from, unfortunately, a lot of leaders today, it wasn't there. So that really defined the experience for me and allowed me to say, as now business leader, to say, how do I want to engage with my people? Yeah. How do I want to define their experience here? Yeah. So I packaged all those good things up, right? I'm not the best at them, but
take the good with you.
Yeah. Take good, leave bad.
Yeah. Right? So what I heard from your experience there is that leadership was, like, again, not all, but a primary driver of like, I'm going to make a decision because there is leadership and there is people that I feel like I can trust, right? Obviously, if it's a new relationship somewhere, it's hard to trust immediately. That takes time. But do I feel like I can trust and follow these people? And I think that is great and so crucial, because easiest place for us to recruit for and to are the ones with great leaders, right? Because once we get people to and connect people to a great leader, well, like, those people are attractive in the sense that, like, if they're a good leader, it's obvious. And people want to say, yeah, you know what? I could spend some time around them. I could be around them. I could follow them. And as you mentioned, like, I think they're going to fight for me. And I think about my own recruiting story. It's on the last episode here if you guys want to listen to it. But there's a couple of both business leaders and football coaches that I knew pretty quickly that they were going to fight for me and they cared about me. And that, like, just caring was like, well, that's different. And
that's new to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like, I want to be around that because I feel cared for. So I think that's awesome. And so you've taken that now and you've helped start Logex, right? So what's it like, one, starting something or restarting something as it may be, then, what have you taken into that to say, okay, I want to be that leader? What kind of leader, have you said, hey, that's what I want us to be, who we are going to be as an identity? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, to start and talking about, hey, what did that journey look like early on, outside of everything we already discussed, my experience, it's more of a disclaimer. My experience more so had to do with enterprise level strategic selling and solution design. Yeah. So that part or piece of the puzzle came natural to me, right? Growing a business came natural. It was the part that was really hard for me was managing people. Right. And learning gifts, if you will, or enhancing gifts of empathy, of understanding, right? The ability to have a different perspective on things, right? And really remaining agnostic in that approach. Right. So I wasn't quick to judge or say, hey, I've been doing this all day. what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Right. And that's not the environment we have. It's not the environment that we try and grow. Right. Our belief is that, hey, when we look at productivity, right, and maybe not productivity, but employee value, right? We look at your character, your work ethic. Can you be a team player? Your coachability. And then lastly, we look at your productivity.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's, hey, be a good person.
Right.
Trust that we're all in this together. And then we'll look at, hey, what are the financial results that you're bringing to the company?
Right.
Right. Because again, they all coexist. They all have to be addressed, but what holds the most weight? And in our belief as a company, and my belief as a leader, it's all the things that I led with, and then the last one, which holds the least amount of weight. Right. I'm not saying don't do the work. Right. It's important. It has to.
It still has a weight.
Right.
Sure.
The business has to keep moving.
Right.
But we go through the first avenues before that. Right. The other things.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to define as employee value before saying, hey, I need you to bring 10x back to me, or you're canned.
Right. And as you mentioned that, as I think through that in my own experience, both recruiting and leading, I find if you have those first few things, well, you're going to have the last thing, right? Like if you have the character, the integrity, that you're a good person with good values and you care about a mission, you're going to get the productivity side done, right? And if you don't, there's probably something else going on.
There's a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And let's figure that out.
Right. And that's part of the beauty of good leaders, right? Not that I'm like patting my back or anything, because I have an amazing team of people that our problems are very small in terms of company dynamics. And when they do come up, we talk about them as adults and they're gone. Right. They learn, we look at each other and say, let's not do this again. And we move on. Yeah. Right. Nothing's held over somebody's head. And that comes back to being a leader that you hope people trust that you're on their side. Yeah. And here's the deal: logistics, everybody you talk to, all day, every day, we're basically problem solving with our work, right? Professional problem solvers. That's who we are. Things are going to go wrong. That's how we respond as a team and as a company to those problems that define our success or failure or our overall approach to the industry.
Right. You talked about, being a leader and getting, Logex started and having to develop some of those things. If I remember right, there was part of what helped you take and start this role was just another connection that you had, right? There was somebody that's kind of like made an introduction to the ownership at Logex, right? Was that like just a passerby, like, hey, you should talk to so-and-so, or was it, fairly intentional thing, or what were the basics of that?
One of the guys on my team at CH, he left and started working in the insurance industry. And he ended up writing a policy for another one of the ownership team's companies.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And through that conversation, they were talking about their experience, his experience at CH. And he's just like, hey, you have a network, I'm sure, of people. Right. Here's what we want to do with Logex. Yeah. Do you have anybody that you can think of that, entertain the conversation at least? Cool. So,
super cool.
Get introduced, have the conversation.
I love that there was just like a natural networking, right? I mean, I tell people ask all the time for tips on, how to network or how to find, opportunities. I'm like, most of the time there are great opportunities in people's networks, but you do need to have conversations and reach out to your network. And sometimes that's just saying, hey, can I help you with something? Right. And in this case, it was a friend who was doing business with, the team that you're now building, which I think is pretty cool. So let's talk more about Logex. Tell me a little bit about what you guys do, right? And then how you guys differentiate yourself in a big market, right? I work with a bunch of different transportation companies all over the country. There are thousands, 3PLs, brokerages out there. Kind of who is Logex and what do you guys do that's different?
Sure. Well, go back 3 years ago. It's still a saturated market with competitors all over the place, right? 15,000 plus brokerage companies in North America. You said that, right? Say there's a lot of guys here,
Right.
a lot of players. Thinking about that 3 years ago, I had to make a decision and say, how do we separate ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Who do we want to be? What's our go-to-market strategy?
Right.
What service lines are we going to offer?
Yep.
Right? Because everybody and their mother
does something kind of similar.
Yeah, got something similar.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
How do we do something different? So fast forward to today. We, over the years, have developed specific programs within the cold chain space.
Okay.
We offer other service lines, but our main focus is in temperature controlled space. So if I were to tell you who Logex is, I'd say we're a niche market logistics company that focuses heavily in the temperature controlled space.
Mm-hmm.
And we've developed out strategic partners in North America and developed full truckload, LTL consolidation programs with those providers to offer our customers in a space that is heavily underserved.
Yeah.
So when you look at temp controlled solutions, dig a little deeper there, right? And say frozen and deep frozen. So the 0 to -10, -10 to -20 range, that is a heavily underserved market in transportation.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's higher risk.
Yeah.
Right? It requires a lot more resources for serving that, right? It's a lot more money to keep a trailer cold at -20 than it is at 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Absolutely.
So what Logex has done is built those programs specifically around our customers within different pockets of the region.
Okay.
And so we're going to build this out, cater it to you, what your needs are, and then amplify it across your whole network.
I love that focus and that niche. And I assume obviously you guys probably do other things as well, but the idea that you guys kind of have an expertise there, and correct me if I'm wrong, I assume that being able to speak to that need allows you to say, we've done it really well for so-and-so. Like you can speak their language when you walk into the next client who has that need.
Well, there's definitely a layer of credibility there.
Yeah.
But our belief is that we let the data tell the story. Right. So when we're a young company, right? So when we talk to people who've been around for 50, 100 years, say, well, why Logex when you guys are, this young? And I got a company that's, 70 years in the industry. Well, they're not going to do what we're doing. Right. And yes, we're still smarter than them, but when we show you our data and say, here are our performance scores, here are how many pallets we're moving. Here is the digitization and automation engagement levels from our carrier partners. And internally, how efficient can we be to mitigate our expenses, but also you as a customer, right? You don't want 30 people, your one account, because what's the greatest risk to anything? Human error, right? We're not perfect. And neither are computers, but there sure is a lot, sure it's like a lot more sophisticated than our fingertips.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. But that's the beauty of why I get to tell these stories and why I enjoy telling these stories in front of our prospects, because the 400% month over month growth doesn't just happen. Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up with, right? But we're doing it.
Yeah. That's massive.
And that speaks directly towards our programs that we built out in a very specific industry.
Yeah. I love the niche. You talk about 400% growth. So I want to obviously in my world, jump to that as someone who now does hiring, right? Like what is there like a specific philosophy that you have or go to, when it comes to recruiting that you maybe have drawn out from past years or from other people? Like, what's that look like for you now? Now that I'm like 400% growth, like we got to add. What's that look like?
Well, in terms of our recruiting philosophy, I don't think there's a perfect formula that says, hey, X growth equals this many people.
Right. Yeah.
We've injected a fair amount of capital into our processes and our technology. So we don't have to hire 1 million people with that growth, right? So we've done an exceptional job of maintaining our bottom line here and letting our top line continue to grow. Now, there's a balance to that. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. There's a balance, right?
Yep.
Can't go one way or the other.
Right.
Because we need to grow as a company and we need to mitigate our expenses. Right. Business leaders thought. Yep. Right. It's like, I need the top line either needs to shoot up to justify the bottom line going up.
Concept battle.
Or somebody that we hire needs to be able to allow us to become more efficient.
Yep.
Right. Which reduces your bottom line.
Yep.
So it is a constant battle, like you said, but bringing it full circle here, there's no formula. And we're always willing to add resources as a company if it makes sense for us to do so, if that's the customer's need. I think of one customer who, they're a very large player in their respective industry, $2 billion plus company. And at the time, we had an infrastructure that supported their volume, right? But because of the requests that they made in terms of personnel, they wanted more people, basically a 24/7 time frame. So that allowed us to say, all right, financially, is this something that we want to go into as a company? Right. Because we know that we can justify it and spread the work out to multiple people. But should we say yes to that?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because we've been able to scale without having to add all these people.
Right.
So it's the balance of figuring out, hey, because a customer asks for it, do we give it to them, or do we try and paint the picture even more to say, you don't really need that today. Right. And, I'm sure I shot off in a different direction there on the question, but really what I would say to wrap that up is we hire based off the demand of our customers. And if we feel that we can continue to scale with the current team that we do have, we're going to have the conversation before with our customers. Right.
Yeah. It sounds like, and I appreciate the honesty there, because there's like this idea of like with demand, right? And it's supply demand, right? I'm going to need productivity via, it looks like there's two potential options: technology and work, hands and feet, right? And like what I appreciate you saying there is, rather than saying, hey, I'm just going to hire blindly, let's see if there's a technology that can allow us to scale the existing team that we have first, right? Or do we truly need more hands and feet to jump in and solve more specific problems, which I think is wise.
Well, that's the thing too, is, we can do all the fancy things internally, but if our customers can't match that in their optimization or efficiency within their own internal network, then our tech might be rendered useless.
Right.
And how we engage with that specific customer.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think of our Alliance program, right? And it's a bread and butter. Yeah. It's what's been driving a lot of this growth, this huge baseline for us. And, we've done an exceptional job of setting the table with any company that comes in that, one, here are the deliverables, here's what you're going to receive. But if you can do all these things on the other side, here's the overall impact where you guys won't have to hire. Right. You can fully outsource that to my team that's already been doing that. Right. And really, we're talking about like, hey, there's no formula. I've kept the same team that manages that program for us intact since we developed it. And it's kept growing at that rapid pace. Yeah. We haven't had to add anybody for it.
It's crazy.
Right. It's wild. But that goes back to, hey, what did we do with our carrier partner that allows us to do that internally? What have we done with our shipper customers that allows us to all engage seamlessly in a way that we're all confident in? Yeah. Right. Because I think as humans, we do want to touch things. Right. Yeah. But that doesn't make sense all the time. Yeah. Right. So what we've done with this, with our partners in this, is streamlined and connected all of our systems from warehousing all the way to the end of the order life cycle at invoicing. It's virtually a no touch once all that the initial information is put in. Talk about scalability. Yeah. Right. And even risk mitigation. Right. You want visibility? Got it. Right. Full breadcrumb trail? Got it. Temperature monitoring in the trailers? Got it. automated invoicing, got it. Right. So even on the last portion of what I said there,
right.
Would you rather a computer trusting and putting the numbers in, or somebody looking at a spreadsheet, punching those in, spending 8 hours a day doing that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But that helps our customer grow, that helps us grow, and that helps our carrier grow as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you feel like that both process and technology is, especially once it's proven out, is so much more widely accepted today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just different world.
It sure is, man.
Cool. Okay. I want to move towards wrapping up and be respectful of your time, everybody's time. Love the story and excited to see where Logex growth goes. Okay. Kind of, thinking through your story. One of the things I always ask people, on this podcast is to look back at your 20-year-old self, right? And, we've got people who listen from executives to leaders in the transportation industry, even to people who are just getting started, right? So if you were looking back, 20-year-old John, what advice would you give yourself now in the industry about your career?
Good question. I have to wear the blanket of humility.
Okay, sure.
And say, what I wasn't good at.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. I would say you don't need to know everything.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, always be learning. Yeah.
Yep.
I think when you're going into, whether it be a new industry, regardless of your age, it can be scary to show people that you don't know what you're doing. Right.
That's good.
Because now that's directly correlated to incompetence.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that because I can look back at myself and I can think about the conversations I have with young professionals all over the country. And there is a fear of saying, I don't know, right? Or there's a fear of saying, I haven't done that yet. Or maybe I'm not sure if I am good at that.
But here's the thing. You said that.
Yeah.
Right? You just said that. And when you look at how we define employee value,
right?
What are the things, right? You may not know what you're doing, but are you a hard worker?
Yeah, right.
Do you have a high level of character?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You be a team player?
Yeah.
Right? Trust you?
Yeah.
We'll get you there.
And that's it, right? To me, if you're a young professional, go find those people. Surround yourself with those people who say, hey, I don't care what you have done in the past. I want to know who you are at your core. And that will allow you to become, what you want to be, what we want you to be within this organization. Absolutely. To accomplish the mission. So I love that. That's good.
One, I think as an employer, with that, from my perspective as business leader and the employer's perspective, for anybody listening that's looking into a new industry or you're about to graduate, it is that we almost prefer you to have a blank canvas.
Yep.
Because we can build that now,
right.
And you don't come in with any previous habits, right? Yeah.
Yep. 100%. I think that's so good. I can just think back of the fear that I had in my own story and journey of being like, no, and confidence is good, right? But so is honesty. And so is just vulnerability to a degree, right? Just saying, hey, I'm not sure. I can be confident that I can be something, but I may not be that now. So that's good. Well, okay, so that's helpful. Typically, I always ask this question too on what's helped shape you. And I'm a big reader. I love to read books, So have there been any books along the journey for you that were like, this is highly impactful? I'd love to share with anybody listening.
The Harry Potter series. No, I'm joking.
I was like, tell me. I want to hear.
There's no underlying philosophy. Yeah. No, I love Harry Potter, but that's not the most impactful.
Not what I was expecting.
Through the curveball. No. So, funny story.
Okay.
The first time I read this book was given to me by my general manager and director at C.H. Robinson.
Okay.
He is now my vice president.
Oh, awesome. Super cool. Yeah.
Super cool. We work really well together. I love him. But the book is Good to Great. Jim Collins.
Jim Collins, yeah.
And as I'm sure people listening could assume, it talks about, and it's a management book, but it talks about how companies get themselves from that good status to great status, what drives them, what infrastructures can you implement to take that leap as a company, right? And why people get stuck in that good circle, right? Yep. And really one of the main philosophies in that, in the book, is fighting through the comfort of complacency.
Good. Yeah.
So I think about that all the time when either I'm down or, we're not something, we get a disruption, right? I'm like, whoa, I've gone through this before.
Right.
I know how we want to respond. Or when you're looking at the future goals, right? Staying vision focused, future focused. I don't want to fall back into that good circle.
Yeah. Right.
What can I do to keep us in this upward trajectory? And who can I surround myself with to enable that as well? Because leadership isn't, and I heard this on a podcast, it's not about how you get things done as a leader. Being a leader is about how you get things done with the right people.
Yeah. Right.
Your job is to enable those right people to get things done.
And they will empower those people.
Exactly.
I love that book. If you have not, go read that book. He writes another one called Great by Choice that I also love. Very similar concept and idea. That idea that you mentioned of like complacency, I think that is still helpful too, because there's to me, there's this idea of when people get stuck in things are pretty good right now too. Sometimes things are a little bit rough and it's it might be okay to say, yeah, we're okay where we're at. But I also see in my own life, my own business, and in other organizations as well, when things get kind of good, people take their foot off the gas a little bit and just read the book, but having consistent habits that allow people to say, we're going to keep marching forward rather than let's just sit right here.
Right. And that's the thing, right? And, I talked to our team the other week or a few weeks back, and I was like, I'm really proud of where we're at. I'm really happy with it, but I'm not content with it.
Yeah.
Right. We haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg here, guys. Right. Again, proud of you all.
Right.
You work tirelessly here, and I hope we reward you well for that.
Right.
But know that I'm not content.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Well, John, I have super enjoyed the conversation. I think it is and will be helpful for a lot of people. We need to have you back on sometime and dig a little bit more into just philosophy and business and all of that. But thanks for joining us. If people want to get in touch with you or Logex, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can shoot me an email personally or send an email to our information inbox. My email is john@logexinc.com. And our other inbox is info@logexinc.com. Cool.
Shoot John or his team a message. And we thank you guys for being on the podcast. We will, or for joining the podcast here. We will look forward to the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks for listening to the Recruiting Stories podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on LinkedIn, Adrian Chapman, and Cover 3 Consulting is our company page. Also check out our website, www.cov3consulting.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we just simply want to remind you that you can change the world by putting people in a position where they can do the most good, and you do that by recruiting. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.